The state of Florida and the United States, we're being monitored by the world because I guess everyone is saying, are they going to get this right this time?
Florida has not entirely put behind it its shameful racist history, and that's a reality. And there has been in this country a history of intimidation and vote suppression, particularly of African Americans.
What I would argue is there's a vested interest, many, many people, to change an election, whether they're outside of our country or inside. The motivation is there, and where there's a will and there's a way, that marriage has always happened.
Get out and vote! Get out and vote! Get out and vote!
In Florida, perhaps more than in any other part of America, it is true to say that every vote counts. In 2000, George W. Bush won the presidential election thanks to only a few hundred votes cast in one Florida county. Now, one of the biggest and most hotly contested of the swing states is once again the battleground on which the country's next president may be decided.
This state has showed so clearly how one vote can begin to make the difference. Make sure you reach out to every single person. The man at the vegetable counter in the grocery store. The person, your aunt, you haven't seen in 15 years. Call her and find out if she's voting. Make sure she votes.
Let's go vote! Let's go vote!
Last week, over 30 different states opened their polls for early voting. And in Miami, thousands of voters, many of them black, turned out in droves.
Come on, all souls to the polls. We got more coming. Come on, they filling it up. It's going to be lines. It's going to be early vote. Like never before. 2004, no more. All souls to the polls.
This officially non-partisan rally was a response to the political and legal drama played out in Florida after the last election.
No fuzzy ballots! No fuzzy ballots! All the votes! Count all the votes! Count all the votes! Count all the votes! It's time for Al to brag! It's time for Al to brag! It's time for Al to brag! So what? He had a right to pay!
Prior to 2000, no one would have imagined that the result of a presidential election could come down to the wire like it did in Florida's Palm Beach County.
We want vote!
The drama was caused by ballots from old-style punch-card voting machines. As officials struggled to make sense of the dimpled, hanging and pregnant chads, manual recounts were first ordered and then halted.
This manual recount process is fundamentally flawed and is no longer recounting, but is distorting, reinventing, and miscounting the true intentions of the voters of Florida.
Governor Bush truly believes that he has won the election in Florida. He should not have any reason to doubt or to fear to have the machine count checked by a hand count.
When the count was eventually stopped by the courts, George Bush had won the presidency with just 537 votes. To avoid a repeat of the confusion in 2000, billions of dollars have been spent on a high-tech upgrade of America's voting systems. And next week, nearly 40% of the entire country will be voting on computerized machines. At the Miami Elections Department, workers are completing their final tests.
From the absentee, you mean, well...
Seth Kaplan knows that over the next few weeks, their efforts will be closely watched by election monitors from around the world.
Oh, definitely. Certainly what happened in 2000. Folks from all over the world, quite literally, are here. And we know that they'll be here. And, we think it's great because this time, certainly, we have every reason to believe everything is going to go very well. And we look forward to everybody from Australia and everybody else in the world going back home and telling everybody how well everything went here in Miami.
But if officials had hoped that electronic voting would prove less controversial than punch card machines, they were wrong. Although the machines are touted as the most secure voting system ever created, critics say that in fact they pose a serious threat to the democratic process.
Let me really drive home this point. If you make a mistake on a paper ballot, okay, you lose your vote. You make a mistake and have the equivalent of an electronic CHAD, you can lose 1 million votes. It can happen in the blink of an eye.
Mathematician and computer expert Michael Wertheimer is one of America's top code breakers, working at the US National Security Agency for 2 decades before branching out into the corporate sector. Last year, he was hired by the state of Maryland to examine electronic voting machines supplied by the company Diebold, and he soon discovered some major flaws.
Each of these computers, I call them computers, they call them touchscreen terminals, has a lock compartment that controls the ability to reboot the machine, that has all the memory that's storing everybody's vote. That little compartment has a lock on it, which looks just like a file lock. One of our guys who had no experience picked the lock in 10 seconds with his ballpoint pen. Then we found out that the key that unlocks it is identical for all 16,000 Diebold terminals. So you have every key as a master key. So you have 16,000 keys running about, all of which open any one of the 16,000 locks. One of our guys popped open this little lock compartment and found in there's a jack that you can hook a keyboard up to. He just connected the keyboard, he hit one button on the keyboard, and up on the screen came a menu that allowed him to become the supervisor without knowing the password. He was able to read off all the keys inside the device, the keys that do the encryption, the keys that the administrator uses to type in his password, all was revealed. He was able to delete votes, start votes, and he was all able to do it by picking a lock in 10 seconds and getting access to the machine.
Despite the concerns about computer voting fraud and low security, officials at the Miami Elections Department say they have all the bases covered.
In the tabulation room right behind us, you see the people working in there. You know, you can't even get on the internet in that room. Again, it's a security measure to make sure that, in fact, these kinds of things can't happen. So all the questions that people have, we are aware of them, and we've taken measures to address those questions. And, you know, I want to point out that, I mean, we might work at the elections department, but first and foremost, we're voters, we're citizens. We care very deeply about this process from that standpoint. And certainly we wouldn't implement anything with which we ourselves were not comfortable as first and foremost citizens, and not just employees here.
We have 155 variations of the ballot for this election November 2nd. So
when the system fails, it's the election officials themselves who bear the brunt of public anger. There is no better example of this than Teresa Lepore, election supervisor in Florida's Palm Beach County.
There are circles next to the candidates' names. All the voter has to do is touch anywhere in the box. Check mark appears in the circle of their choice. The rest of the circles disappear, which eliminates overvoting, voting for more than the number of candidates allowed.
4 years ago, it was Lepore who designed the confusing punch card ballot that led to thousands of people voting for the opposite candidate to the one they had intended.
Hindsight's 20/20, and I'll never do it again.
She also played a key role in halting the vote recount.
Well, it all comes.
She's been described as the most hated woman in America.
There's a segment of the population that feels that I did it on purpose, which I did not obviously do it on purpose. I would never put anybody through the torture I've gone through over the last 4 years. But we've come a long way in trying to make things better and to improve everything. There's still people out there that still blame me for what happened. I get blamed for 9/11. That's my fault. The war in Iraq's my fault. Anything that happens is my fault because I put the wrong man in the White House is what it boils down to. And I just, it's very unfortunate. It's even cost me my job. They can vote a secret ballot.
Like many election supervisors in Florida, Lepore's position is an elected one, and just last month she was voted out. She'll remain in her job until the end of the year, but Lepore remains bitter about her experience.
Where is all this coming from?
The Democratic Party. And basically what it boils down to is I won't kowtow to them. I won't do what they want me to do. I'm going to follow the law and do what I think is best for all voters in this county, not just a select few. And they don't like that and have never liked it, which is why I've never gotten really involved with that partisan politics.
Voters.
But Teresa Lepore's troubles are not over yet. The day early voting started in Palm Beach County, her mainframe computer system broke down, causing lengthy delays. And this wasn't the first or most serious problem encountered with Lepore's new system. The computerised voting machines were first challenged in the courts 2 years ago during council elections in the city of Boca Raton.
There was a 17-point lead with the last week of the campaign. When the campaign finally came, we were there and we had people, all our people were out and voting, and the word was good, Dansu's going to win, and so forth.
Emile Dansu was mayor of Boca Raton for much of the 1980s, so when he decided to run for city councillor in 2002, he was well placed for victory. In fact, several polls, including exit polls, had him way ahead of his nearest rival. But on election day, a curious thing happened with the voting machines.
We had 12 people who came in and gave affidavits and said that they either they didn't think their vote got counted, or he said, I pushed 1 and number 2 lit up, or also another one's machine froze when they voted, and the poll worker came and pulled the plug, and he plugged it back in again. The screen was cleared. Was that vote lost or was it not lost? You know, it was, who knows what happened to it.
Dansu lost the election. According to the computer, it was by thousands of votes. With reports streaming in about faulty machines, Dansu filed a lawsuit challenging the result and was invited to attend Teresa Lepore's office with a court-certified computer expert.
She went into Teresa Lepore's office with us when we were having our lawsuit. And she said, the machine, I can trick the machine, Mrs. Lepore. She says, let's see you. So the specialist pressed 1 and 3, and 2 lit up only. And Teresa Lepore said, oh, you slipped your hand, it was slippery. She says, well, watch me again very closely. She pushed 1 and 3, 2 lit up. She pressed 4 and 5, 4 and 6, and 5 lit up. Teresa Lepore said, oh, that must be a faulty machine. It was her sample machine to teach people about how it works. So that was the bottom line there, so that's how things go.
With no paper trail to verify what actually happened, Emile Dansu lost his case, but it has sparked a flurry of similar lawsuits demanding the right to a backup system to record a vote on paper. But Teresa Lepore remains adamant that her computerised voting machines are fail-safe.
So he lost by thousands of votes. It wasn't even close. And he's blaming the machines because all his friends and all these people told him that they voted for him.
They told him that they voted for him, but that somebody else's name came up.
No, that he actually, that was not, we checked the machines, and that never happened. They actually voted for somebody else, but they didn't want him to know that they didn't vote for him because they didn't want to hurt his feelings.
But incidents like the one in Boca Raton highlight the impossibility of resolving disputes over votes that are cast on computers.
You're much, much worse off than you were in 2000. There's no audit trail. There's no ability to at least look at a dimpled card, have an argument over it, and say yay or nay. This is an electronic record. It's just a string of zeros and ones stored on a media. And how that was stored may have been broken. The software may be broken. There's no way to go back and fix that, shy of calling for another vote.
We got a party. We got a poll party. Come on, let's do a poll party. Come on, do a poll party.
Beyond the fears of an electronic election catastrophe, there is another shadow looming over American democracy. In many states, including Florida, hundreds of thousands of citizens will be denied the right to vote.
In Florida, a person with a felony conviction loses the right to vote, often for life, unless the governor and the cabinet choose to give that right to vote back as a form of clemency, like a pardon, for example. And what that means is that in Florida, there are more than 600,000 people who have served all their time, they've paid their debt to society, and yet they still can't exercise their most fundamental right in democracy.
Courtney Strickland works for the American Civil Liberties Union in Florida. She says that because 40% of disqualified felons are black, the law unfairly targets African Americans.
Florida's voting ban against people with past felony convictions has been in our state constitution since 1868. That's the constitution Florida had to adopt in order to be readmitted into the U.S. after the Civil War. That means that particular law comes from the same time as poll taxes, literacy tests, and all the other mechanisms that were used to prevent African Americans from being able to vote after the end of slavery.
Linda Johnson is from the National Association for the Advancement of Coloured People, or NAACP. She believes that hundreds of thousands of black voters in Florida are being disenfranchised by antiquated and unfair laws.
It's worrying me, and it's making me more persistent in making sure that I stand firm on what is right. So it does worry me. And I'm not sure of what is behind that and why is it happening.
Johnson is deeply concerned that many blacks who are not felons will also be prevented from voting. She says the law is enforced so crudely that anyone sharing the same name as a felon is also denied the right to vote.
The felons list is so vague, it only specifies and states the person's name in the county. So it's nothing to be able for, it's nothing there for us to be able to identify that particular person, because it does not specify the birth date, it does not have anything related to the Social Security number. And if you have a common name such as John Brown, Palm Beach County on a felons list, how many John Browns do we have in Palm Beach County?
We are the Sunshine State. The sun is shining on us today. The sun will shine on all America when John Kerry is the next president of the United States of America.
In the past month, both John Kerry and George W. Bush have seen more of Florida than most Floridians.
So here's the deal. Here's the deal, South Florida. I'm here in the state of Florida, and George Bush is in the state of denial.
They know that whoever takes Florida stands a good chance of becoming the next president. But questions about how the vote was cast are likely to cloud the election outcome. Teams of Democrat and Republican lawyers have already been assembled to challenge the vote. And of even more concern, some critics fear that weaknesses in the electoral system could be deliberately exploited.
I've got a group of smart guys, very smart guys, who feel you don't have to be that smart to actually go in and genuinely change the election, given everything they know. I said, surely you'll be caught doing this. They wrote down for me 10 scenarios I hadn't even thought of. That is common law in hacking communities that I think would blow right through this election.
Let's Let's go out and make it happen. Thank you, and God bless you all.